Excellent. Well, we've got a nice international crowd, which is fabulous. And there's better weather elsewhere in the world, which always makes me feel better about life. Sure. Over to you guys if you want.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I'll just introduce Natalie Bank. She's going to be presenting today. She's had a very distinguished career in traditional HR. She co-developed the concept of Agile HR to reduce the process overload and to put basically people back into the center of HR rather than just processes. She hosted the first Agile HR meeting up in London. And that was with the aim of building a community of like-minded disruptors or people who think about HR a bit differently. And it's since grown into a regular event held across the world. She's co-authored the book, Agile HR, Delivering Value in a Changing World of Work. She uses Agile HR to create great places to work. You can buy them after the meeting. She uses Agile HR to create great places to work, to attract the best talent. Very good, John. And she's also the founder of, most recently, she's the founder of PXO Culture, which is focused on defining modern HR for the 21st century and beyond. And personally, I'd like to say that I think this meeting, even if you're not in HR, I think this is going to be very interesting because it shows how you can apply the principles of Agile to areas that traditionally wouldn't be associated with Agile. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Natalie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Malcolm. It's very kind. Well, it's lovely to be here, and I've already got a sense of where everyone is from, which is really nice, and of course what the weather is like, which is the most important thing of every day. So I will talk a little bit about sort of what does Agile mean for HR, and then I'm going to move into a kind of a more interactive approach where I'm going to ask you to think about an actual business challenge or an organizational challenge that links to HR, and then get you to think about how you might approach that using some of the Agile tools and techniques. And I find this useful for everyone. So if you're in HR, you'll be able to, think about how could you directly apply this. If you're not directly in HR, just like Malcolm said, it does actually help you think about how to go about a more of a people practice or people project in a more human-centric and agile way, but also how you could try and help your HR colleagues start to embrace more the Agile mindset, or how you could work together. So I find that a lot of Agile people or tech people are coming across the need to change some of the people processes in an organization to help collaboration, to help their ways of working, and to help Agile flourish. So we'll be looking at how might you be able to do that in an Agile way rather than the more traditional way, which is what we're trying to really challenge here. So like always, I'm trying to cover loads, so we'll see how we go. All right. A big theme is what we're looking at is how do you start to build HR, and maybe we don't even use that term in the future, but how do we build the people part of the organization for what I'm calling this new working paradigm? And before the pandemic, we were already talking a lot about the need for organizations to be much more customer-centric, much more collaborative, and definitely much more like a network where small teams can link up together and innovate and get things done in response to the customer needs. So those trends were already happening. And what's really interesting is that the pandemic, of course, has just served to accelerate that. And I'm seeing this now across all all industries, this desire of how do we get closer to a lot of the ideals of Agile. Now, as you all know, there's lots of different ways that you can get there. And Agile itself is not the answer, but the method of working that Agile gives helps you get to those answers. And that's what it's all about. So Agile ways of working helps you become more collaborative, become more customer-centric, and be able to work as a network. And that's why I'm seeing it come into so many different organizations, and also why now it needs to be, HR needs to be involved as well. So the big theme is to enable business agility, so to help our organizations be more agile, then definitely HR itself needs to understand what that is, because only by understanding how you work that way, what the mindset is, can you help build the right people practices to support that. And that's a big theme. And that's as much as using the tools and techniques ourselves, as well as building that for our organization. So I'm Natalie Bank, and you've heard all about me. So the main thing is, if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do so. I love to see you on there. And I do lots of kind of resources and videos and those kind of things. So generally, there's lots of good tools that you can go and use that I either have on the website at PXO Culture or on LinkedIn. And at LinkedIn, at PXO Culture, we do a lot of events, and some of them are free. So we've got one about how you use Agile to build your career, which is so helpful if you want to develop your own career, but also if you develop careers of others. And it's about how you apply Agile ways to do that. And then we also have a paid one coming up, which is a 3-hour design sprint. So it's how do you use design thinking and Agile to actually design something in the HR area, and we use career development, so building career development internally as an example. So if you want to come along, please do. Okay, so I would love to know a little bit more about who's on the call. So if you could put into chat, what's your current role and what's your interest in Agile? So are you in HR and you're interested, or you currently use Agile, or perhaps you're an Agile coach and you want to partner with HR. So what's your interest in Agile HR and what is your role? If you could put that into chat, that would be great, because then I can get a sense of the mix on the call today. Fantastic. Senior Officer, HR Officer, General Knowledge of Agile. Great. Lovely to meet you, Sarah. And we have an Agile coach, ex-HR. Yeah, nice connection. I like that. And you're out from Indonesia. Fabulous. And we've got quite a few HR. So HR in the development side would like to do the crossover to Agile coaching. Great. HRD, fabulous. Make HR more relevant, great. HR manager, general knowledge. Group HR manager, getting into Agile, excellent. Nice to see, Marie. Malcolm, not in HR, interested to see how you apply the principles, great. I mean, lots of HR managers. We've got a HR director, international region, fabulous. Director R&D, interesting how Agile could be applied in people experience and management. Yeah, definitely, John. Well, we got a master's PhD in HR and assistant professor at university and OD consulting. Excellent. Great. And we've got IT recruitment specialist, fab. That's a really interesting space. And actually Agile is really nice for the recruitment area. So, and we've got release trained engineer, fabulous, in scaled Agile framework and generally interested. Excellent. And then we've got quite a range. We've got HR administrators, we've got care home manager, general interest in Agile, HR director. Excellent. Okay, so we've got a really nice mix. So I think the way that we're going to do this talk should resonate, should help people for different reasons. And if you have any questions as we go, just pop them into chat and I will pick them up as we go. All right. So a big part of this topic is a need to take what I think traditionally has been more tech-related concepts of Agile and translate that into the world of HR, culture, and organizational change. And so just like Agile itself, it's all about you put the customer at the heart of what you do, and then you look at incrementally, and this is quite a different thing for HR. So incrementally, slice by slice, sort of piece by piece, deliver value through to that customer. So this means it's a movement away from the kind of big bang, one size fits all solution that we have tended to favor in the world of HR over the years, and it's looking at how could you actually verify value early and then start to deliver it often across the organization. So it relates to trying to really understanding the problem of what you're trying to solve out of these big complex topics that we cover. So, great examples at the moment is the well-being of our people or building a hybrid office. They're massive, huge, complex topics. So where would you start and why? And how would you know you're delivering value? And these are the things that Agile starts to help you do. So we want to incrementally deliver value to our customers, which in the world of HR is our people. So it does make it much more human-centric as well. So we're looking at how do we make user-friendly solutions, and if it's for humans, then ideally we're looking at being very human-centric as a result. We also want to have all the skills in the team to get the job done. So Agile is all about self-organizing, multi-skilled teams. We often use this term T-shape, so breadth of experience and then some deep specialisms that can respond to the customer real time. If you take that into the world of HR, that's really interesting because it starts to challenge some of the silos or the topic areas that we've had up until now. So for example, in the past, I looked after talent, or I looked after learning and development, or I looked after reward or recruitment. But as we all know, to solve a complex problem for the business, we always have to get each other to help, and we always have to form these teams. And then we're on it like, I don't know, half a day of the week. And so we've just got all these projects going, and it's very hard to really deliver that value. So this is how do you bring a multi-skilled team together, not just HR people, potentially people from the organization as well, and solve that complex problem together, test, prototype, and deliver across the business. So that's what we're going to look at. And I thought I'd just put this in. It's a few words on the page, but it's nice to think about how the Agile Manifesto that was written in 2001, so it's 20 years old this year, how that resonates and connects into the world of HR. And for me, there's just so many correlations. So the first one is all about interactions and individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Well, this is people before process. And I'm sure you all talk about this. The classic is performance management. It's not about the tools, it's about the conversation. But unfortunately, the tools start to sometimes override the experience of performance management. The next one, working software over comprehensive documentation. Well, this is about getting a people experience up and running, understanding what the experience is for people, really kind of connecting with the journey that people are going through, and then building solutions based on the user experience. And this you're wanting to get working before you write the employee policy, because the policy in the end is about making real-time decisions, isn't it? About things that happen in the workplace. So don't just write the policy, think about the experience. The next one is all about creating value together. So rather than, again, and we don't do this we do this for sometimes the right intentions, but sometimes we can build a solution and then release it out across the business without necessarily properly user testing first. And it's not until it's out in the organization do we really understand if it works or not. So Agile is all about how can you collaborate together to really know that what you're building is the right solution. So a good example would be one of the first projects I did where I discovered Agile was I was asked to help redesign performance management and reward for a company that worked in a very agile way. And I was asked to do it in an agile way, and it hadn't really worked that way before. So it was quite new for me. And so I set up these small experiment groups to try different ways of giving feedback. What happens if you take away ratings, what's going on for people and how they give feedback, and what's the connection to performance. And in one team, I gave them an app, so an app on your phone. And I thought, oh, they'll love this, because this app was to help them give each other feedback. And they were techies, so I thought this would be great. And they hated it. They hated the app, and they said, well, we don't need an app to give each other feedback. We need a psychological safe environment where we can feel okay to give feedback. And it was really interesting because it made me realize that the problem here was more about the ratings of performance and the fact it was so connected to bonuses, and people didn't feel safe to give feedback. So it was a great example where in the past, I might have rolled that app out across the whole business as the solution. But because I experimented and tested and found out that that wasn't even the problem to solve, I went about it in a different way. And of course, then the last one is, how do we adapt and change rather than prescribe the solution, which I'm sure you're all connecting to. Okay, so a big theme of today's session is co-creating the employee experience. So how do you build it with the people that you work with? How do you build it with people across the business? How do you know that the solution is going to help them get the job done? And I suppose that's always my overriding theme, is that what we do in HR, culture, and organizational change is about helping people be great in their job so they deliver value through to that end customer of the organization. And that end customer could be the person in the care home, it could be the person in the community, or it could be somebody buying the products. It can be, not for profit as well as profit. And but this idea of whatever we do in terms of the people practices should be enabling people to do the job better, rather than kind of adding on and getting in the way. So that's a big theme. All right, so we've got, right, cool. I'm just looking at how much time we've got left for the next bit. Okay, so the way that we're going to do the rest of the session is I would like you to think about a people practice or a HR situation that you think needs to be improved in your organization. So it might be it's sort of a business challenge that you might be working on at the moment, or something that you would like to see improved or changed, maybe removed in your organization. And what we're going to do is we're then going to work through a series of questions that all link to the Agile mindset to help you think about how could you go about solving this business challenge in an Agile way. What I'm going to do is at various stages, similar to what we've done now, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to give you time to do some silent brainstorming. And then if you feel happy to share, I'd love to see your ideas in chat. But, it's totally up to you what you'd like to share today. And if, as I said earlier, if you've got a question as we go, just fire away. Okay, so let's start with that. Can I get you all to think about what business challenge would you like to use as we go through the next stage? So think about a HR or people practice in your organization that you think needs to be improved or fixed, changed. So something that is happening for you. And if anyone is willing to share in chat, I'd love to see some of the examples so I can make some connections. Excellent. All right. So John is looking at promotions, salary increases. Fabulous topic. Been discussing that with an organization just the other day. Okay. And we've got someone looking at improving the learning and development in the organization. We've got the good classic performance management for an Agile team. Excellent. Always a great topic. Stack ranking, yeah, people at the end of the year for bonus. So I've actually been working with an organization that's aiming to remove that at the moment. So I can give some examples. Employee retention, career development, great. Again, yeah, always a hot topic. Succession planning, hiring challenges in competitive environment, finding good talent. Yeah, Margaret, this is a really interesting one I won't go, I'm going off into a tangent, but actually the pandemic has also even increased the challenges around hiring. So it's really, really interesting. Burnt out in remote working. Yep, can relate to that. Policy in Agile HR. Great. Hiring, getting team players open to learning. Excellent. All right. So we've got some nice, good examples there. So keep that example in mind, or that challenge, as we go through the next steps. So first of all, think about your business challenge and just think, well, how would HR traditionally solve this problem? So what might they traditionally do? up until now. So, and I'm not saying that you do this necessarily, but what might be the traditional HR way of solving the business challenge that you have. So we've got, so for example, in career development, often we do competency frameworks. That's a kind of more traditional HR. I'm not saying they're not right, but we often need to think of them, how to make it much more dynamic now. They wouldn't. Cool. So if anyone's got an example of how HR might traditionally solve the problem that you have, I'd love to see it in chat. Or as Aidan says, they wouldn't. All right, cool. So another good example is, yeah, great. That's a great example, Brian. So through policy and processes, you know, we have seen that along John through a big bang big bang rewards planning, definitely. And reward is really interesting because I think it's one of the last areas of HR to truly start to get disrupted. And it's still very, in most organizations, very yearly based, kind of all at once, end of year event, these kind of things. We've got more training programs, especially for leadership, definitely. So we often have training solutions as the answer. And then we've got too much reliance on using same processes, which don't necessarily address or fix the problem. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one, Margaret, because I think performance management or reward is good examples of that. We often take the process and maybe rearrange it or just tweak it a bit, where sometimes we actually really need to think, is this process right in the first place? So I think that's a really great example. Malcolm, same process for everyone. And then we've got Mary Kate, hiring the wrong candidate was the position needs to be filled. Great. And we've got no budget to promote the wider thinking, so one naturally resorts to old-fashioned method. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point as well. So when stuck with no budget or time, or also faced with a more legacy ways of working around us, that's what we do. So so really great points. Okay, excellent. Let's move forward. So what if we solve our business problem with an agile mindset instead? And when I say business, I mean all kinds of organizations, by the way. It can be not for profit as well as profit. So that's just a term that I use. And I'm an Aussie, so there's probably half the words you won't understand anyway. So all right, so what if you solve the business problem that you're facing with an agile mindset? Let's go through a series of tools and techniques just to get you thinking, well, how could I apply a more agile way? And also the idea here is that I'm quite kind of tool agnostic and framework agnostic. So don't say, oh, you should go and use one particular framework. I'm actually about building a toolbox of agile mindset. And as we've quite rightly got a point here, behaviors, so agile values and behaviors. And then how can you choose the right things to use at any one time? And also depending on the context that you're in, then it might not be right to use all of the agile tools and techniques. They might not be ready. You just might not have that capability. So sometimes just using one or two of the approaches that I talk about today will be really useful just to get a kind of different and better result. Great. And yeah, excellent point. Agile is not only a mindset, agile is behaviors. Exactly. Okay, so we've got some design principles that we're going to work through. The first one is pretty obvious. So first one is know your customer. So if you think about that business challenge, how do we move away from some of the assumptions that sit around that topic? Perhaps some of the assumptions of our senior leaders as well around that topic, or what we've done before. And how do we find out what are the real business or organizational and employee needs? So what do people actually need about this topic? How's it actually going to help them do their job better? Also, how can you validate this through some actual data and feedback? So what's the data that you've got about the problem that you're facing? How do you know that it's a problem? And also, how would you start to measure fixing that problem. So who's your customer and what is the problem you're trying to solve, basically? And when I say customer, I'm meaning the part of either the organization that you're focusing on, the employee group, maybe there's certain type of personas. If it's all employees, then you start to think about, well, would I actually try and solve it for everyone first, or would I start one area where the problem's, worse to begin with? So starting to think about the different types of customers, particularly internal, that you've got for your problem. So first silent brainstorm is for your own business challenge. Who is the customer? And what is the problem you need to solve? So can you define the problem more clearly? So for example, a team I've worked with looked at career development, and they went and did some research around it, and they found that actually people saw career development in lots of different ways. But through that, they found that the main problem to solve first was actually connecting people with opportunities in the organization. So, and those opportunities could be maybe a mentor, it could be a new job, or it might be a project or different experiences. And that was the main problem to solve around career development. So if you think about your business challenge, do you have a sense of what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and who the main customer is? And it'd be great to see your thoughts on that. And great, I've just got a question, so I'll answer that in a little bit as well. Okay, so we've got two examples. Margaret has got the customer is the business, and then Aidan, the burnout issue for the customer is the employee. And Vince, customer in my case are the people on your team. So the people, so we're thinking about the particular team. And for John, we've got customers are people who create the value we deliver to end customer. Yep, so the people that are actually delivering through to that end customer. So we've got Margaret can be employee management company. Yeah, employees, high turnover. Employees are the business. Problem is how to help them take ownership in their career development. So really good to see that you're kind of, okay, we're starting with that kind of the group of the employees or the business itself. Depending on the size of your organization, that could be pretty big. So with Agile, we're always trying to break down possible areas of where to start first and why. And also maybe there's areas of the business where the problem is more pronounced, or actually if you solved it there first, that would be a great test case to then look at how the right solution for the wider organization. So what I would encourage you all to think about is going forward from here is would you even break down some of those segments of the employees or the business or management into either persona groups or sort of a prioritized area that you might start first, and why? Because actually the more we can break down a problem and actually start to test solutions in different areas to then roll them out, the better. Excellent. And I would say that personas are really useful, or kind of segmenting the workforce and thinking about the different types of persona groups, because that really helps to bring the problem to life. So a really great example for a lot of these things would be going to actually and interviewing a selection of persona types to see how the problem comes out for them. And then also thinking about the experience that some of those people are going through at the moment. What are the pain points for them and how would you start to solve them? Great. All right, so we did have a question that came through, and I might just touch on it a bit now. So we had a question about HR doesn't care with Agile transformation. They are not in an Agile team and how to drive them. So I suppose this talk is about the fact that one of the best ways to get HR to be part of the transformation is for them to start understanding what Agile is. And actually, Agile can really help HR teams get better results. So that's what I kind of focus on a lot. There is a key thing around experiencing Agile ways of working. I'm sure you would know that, to then understand how to build the right solutions for Agile teams. So the more you can get them to open up to that, and sometimes that could even be inviting them in to observe and be part of the Agile part of the organization, then the more that they can start to connect and understand what is needed for an Agile transformation. But that's, for me, is a big theme of this talk, is how can HR better understand Agile so actually they can be part of that transformation? Because a big thing is, I think that if you don't have HR involved in that transformation, you actually might not be successful, because people practices are such a big part of transformation. Cool. And then we've got one other comment: main problem managing Agile teams with traditional human resource methods. It is, and I think quite quickly when you're in transformation, the people practices become blockers, don't they, to that Agile transformation. And what we're going to look at here is, so what might also, however, what the big fear is, or perhaps the wrong way to go about it, is I've seen some organizations go, oh, okay, well, Agile teams need a different way of doing performance. So they go and design a whole new solution and do a big bang change around performance to fit a more Agile ways of working. And I've seen it fail, because it's again, it's not an Agile way of building that new approach. So one of the best examples I've seen is a business that was very Agile, and they started in one part of the business, so one main kind of tech area. They did a whole year test around how do you do performance management differently to suit a more Agile ways of working. And that was, remove ratings. They had fixed percentages of bonuses that was more collective. So they had a whole range of solutions. They tested that for a year. It worked. They actually had evidence that that impact the net promoter score. And then they rolled that out into the wider part of the business, but they also, iterated and improved it as they went. And they're 4 years down in the journey, and they've now got this whole new way of doing performance management, but everyone is totally built into that, and they co-created it. So for me, yes, we can see the problems, but you've also got to think of an Agile incremental way of how do you build the change in the organization. Okay, so we've only had one, so I'm going to keep moving forward. So the first one was know your customer. The second one is define the value. So a big part of Agile is thinking of what is the value you're going to deliver by solving this problem. And this is really interesting for HR teams to start thinking about, because the HR teams I've worked with sometimes struggle to articulate the value that we're going to deliver and how we are adding value to the business. And a good example is, we often have really big, complex problems in our strategy, or the people strategy. So building talent of the future, retaining talent, improving the well-being of our organization, building the new hybrid workplace. These are all really big projects and really big topics. And so what Agile's always saying is, well, how did you find the main problem to solve first? Because there could be a range of problems in all those topics. And then what's the thing that you're going to deliver first, and why? And how would you know that is of value? And how would you measure it? And then how would you start to track value over time? And how would you know you've actually solved that problem or delivered enough value so you can actually start to look at fixing the next big problem? So this is how Agile helps you prioritize, but also helps you start to articulate the value and kind of the value you're delivering through the business. Also, it's also good to think about for your problem from different viewpoints. So if you think about the problem you're trying to solve, first of all, what's the value to the business? So the business bottom line, is this going to increase productivity, for example? The next one is, what's the value to that end customer? So this is the person either buying the products or the people in the community. So that flow through. So could we demonstrate that by solving the problem we're doing now, it's actually going to impact through to the end customer, because that's what the organization is all about. And then, of course, the value to the employee. So just to get you thinking a little bit differently today, I'd like you, and I saw that kind of John and some others were thinking along these lines. If you solved your business challenge, what would be the value to the end customer? So if you did solve the reward problem, how would that actually flow value through to that end customer? Would it be that people were delivering better service, so you would see an impact with the Net Promoter Score? Would there be better productivity? So have a think about that. And is there any metric that you could track? So by solving your business problem, would you actually see value through to the end customer, and actually could you track it with a metric? So this one's always a really interesting one. So, you know, by solving the career development problem or solving the performance management problem, how would it actually flow through to that end customer of the organization? All right, so we've got Margaret leading the way. So increased revenue. Okay. So we would have people buying more products would be the value. So better kind of service or product development through to the end customer. Was that how you'd increase revenue? But good metric to definitely track. And we've got John, we've got better predictability on flow of value to customer. Nice. Okay. Turnover, frustration. Greater turnover, lower frustration, higher morale, empowered employees. I like it. I like it. And I really like this interesting, I think you've really interesting concept of the idea of if we're performing, if we're more happy and we're actually more aware of our performance, then we can predict how we're delivering through to that end customer. So we're actually sort of more in control of the workflow. And I think that's a really, because that's an agile concept as well, isn't it? How do you become better at predicting and estimating that work? Excellent. So we've got increased sales. We use OKR for tracking purposes. Yep, OKR is a fab one and a really nice kind of connection into this. Margaret, resourcing gap, having the right people in the right place, no resource gaps, helps the company meets its revenue targets. Fabulous. Aidan, the value to tackling burnout for employees would be happier and more productive, so we can track retention, defect rates, and goal delivery. Excellent. Ronan, part of the issue I have found is that HR has traditionally been seen as a touchy-feely type department and don't have the tools and experience to develop meaningful metrics to showcase the benefits of their activities. Yep, I totally agree, Ronan. I think, and for me, this is where Agile could really help HR, because you need to actually become quite specific about what are you actually going to deliver and what does that look like, because and also moving beyond just the engagement survey as a measure. So really thinking about delivery. And this could be anything from the usage statistics of a career, solution that you send out, or a website that is supposed to help people internally, through to actually Net Promoter Score and increase revenue. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to keep moving. I'll come back to your question soon. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we've got number 3 is innovate within constraints. So I'm just going to touch on a few and then we'll do another silent brainstorm. So one of the big things around the world of HR is that we often say, well, we've got to meet compliance needs, or we've got to meet regulation. And I totally agree. But in the world of Agile, what we talk about is actually they're the constraints that you map out, and then you look at how you work with those. So first of all, is it a constraint that really limits the solution, or is it something that you can work within? And also, how do you design the solution to aim to get a great user experience and then see how you're meeting your compliance needs. So a nice example is always your performance management situation. A lot of performance management systems have been designed with view of collecting information for compliance. So sometimes even ratings reflects that. Oh, we want to have a rating, so if we need to manage low performance, we've got something to track. But as we know, not many people are very willing to give that low rating, even if there's a problem with performance. And performance is much more of a real-time thing. There's often something going on for that performance not to be as high. And actually, you're much better at going out and finding out what that is, have real-time conversations, and either helping that person, or if that person is not fitted very well to that job, perhaps looking at changing that for them. So, and we've got a lot of performance management systems where there's approvals, right? Tick this, tick this, tick this, or the manager needs to approve it to then to go over to here and to here. And that's all this kind of data collection for compliance reasons. It creates a really bad user experience and often leads to people not wanting to use the tools because it feels like this sort of add-on and a form that they have to fill in. So how do we flip it? How do we build a solution that actually helps people get the job done and then look at how we meet those compliance needs? Often when you do it that way, you don't need half those approvals. They're not actually needed. They're just assumed to be needed in the first place. And then so number 4 ties into that a lot. So this is the whole idea of starting to think about the employee experience a lot like that customer experience that we're starting to really build solutions for in the business or the community. So there's a journey that the employee goes through, and there's key moments that matter in that journey. So, when someone starts a new job, that is such a key moment. We want to get that right. We want them to feel that they belong. They want to get them to contribute from word go. So if we've got some problems with that onboarding or supporting someone going into a new job, then that's when we can lose talent. So we know that's a moment that matters. So how do you go and find the moments that matter? And how do you find the problems to solve? And this is a lot of design thinking. So design thinking can really help HR in this space. And I actually find that this is one of the easiest areas for HR to start to work with. And you'll get great results just by bringing in some of these thinking. Also, design thinking helps you break that complex problem down. So a good example would be a company that had a problem with management development. And the problem was that they were doing all these big management development programs and hardly anyone had time to go to them. So they had, and we're talking about a company of like 40,000 people. So it was a really big company. So they had all these managers, and all the managers said that they wanted development, but most of them didn't have time to go to, say, these 2-day programs that they were running. So they actually stopped them all. And they went, well, let's go and find out what's going on for managers. And what they found through some design thinking is that managers talked about problems they needed to solve, not skills that they needed to develop. So someone would say, oh, well, I need to hire someone tomorrow and I don't know how to do it. So I'd really like to learn how to do that. Or I've got to go and have a difficult conversation tomorrow and I don't know how to do that. So I need some help on that. But the managers saw it as a problem then and there. They didn't see it as the reason to go on a program in 2 months' time. So what they started to do is they started to prototype and test small learning solutions that the manager could access when they had these problems. And then they even started to connect the learning to the HRIS, so the big system that sends out some of the messages around employee actions. So a manager might get a message, oh, you've got to have a performance review. Do you need to learn how to do that? And they go, oh my God, yes. And they would click on some learning, or they would go and speak to a coach, or they would watch a video. So they started to kind of really connect the learning in much more into the flow of work. And it started to transform how they did learning. And they started with managers, but they then went from there across this whole organization. What was also really interesting is they touched all managers at the same time, rather than just however many people could go to a two-day program at any one time. So it's really interesting. If you start to think about how does the manager, how does the problem exist for the employee or manager? How are they looking at it? And how could you switch it and put the solution into the flow of work? You start to get some really different results. And all of that is about working much more evidence-based. So first of all, what's the problem? Then what's your hypothesis that you're going to test with this? So I think that, by providing learning at the time that the person has the problem, we'll get more engagement with the learning, and actually people's skills will change. So that's your hypothesis. So how would you then go and test it? And all of this helps you manage your HIPPO. So your highest paid person's opinion. And I don't know about you, but that totally influences HR world. People often turn up with the solution when they are in the world of HR. So just looking at time. Do we have time to? Yeah, all right, we could do this one. So go back to your problem and think about your hypothesis. So if have you got a hypothesis about what you think you could do to fix your problem? So by doing, X, then Y percentage of users are going to do Z. So that will start to get you thinking about how could you maybe start to test that hypothesis. So this sort of links into thinking about what might the solution be. So it'll depend on where you are with your challenge. But what's your hypothesis? So we sort of, John was sort of playing with this a little bit earlier. So there's the hypothesis of, higher engagement leads to less turnover, which leads to more predictive outcomes. So it'd be great to see if anyone else has got some hypotheses at play. Great, yeah, and we've got improved employee net promoter score. Excellent. Cool. Yeah, so I can also. So a hypothesis can also help you in the prototype stage. So a good example is actually, I think I mentioned earlier. So a company that was looking at career development, and they looked at how people see career development in different ways. And they decided the main problem to solve first was connecting people in the organization to either job opportunities or the ability to get a mentor or projects, etc. But they wanted to actually test is their idea first before they went and designed it. So the main solution that they thought about was having an IT solution. So that would connect to be like a LinkedIn internally. So what they did is they actually went, well, before we do anything about the IT system, let's just test if this idea would work. So they went and designed some cardboard cutouts with pictures on it that looked like the IT system. And they went and put it in front of employees. And they went, okay, employee, what would you do? And they went and observed whether people would want to click on the links on this web page. And if they clicked on a link, then they would show them the next page and say, okay, what would you like to do now? And they were testing whether this was something that actually people would want to use, and would it actually see as a solution that could fix their problem. And just by prototyping on this really basic level of using cardboard cutouts, they had enough information to then go and invest in a whole big project. So you can also do these hypotheses at a really basic level first to then go, yeah, I've got enough evidence here to keep moving in this project. Cool. All right. So we've got participation goes up for customized training because it's exactly what they need. Great. Okay. So I think this one, Sandrina, is a really great example because it'd be really interesting to think about how could you test that in a really cheap way before you did even the full customized training. So could you maybe do it, just test one part of it first and then see what the engagement with that is, and then go and customize more training. Training is a nice one that you can break down into small chunks, can't you, and actually test sort of minimal viable products before you then roll out. Great. So that's a nice example of a hypothesis. Okay, keep going. I'm conscious of time. So number 6, fight the process waste. So let's think about how do we enable people to do their job, rather add on to people's jobs. So very important in terms of processes. So the more ticks or the form that the person has to fill in to kind of get it done, the longer time it takes for them. So, and if that takes them away from their day job, it's not really helping them get the work done. So how do we go much more into the flow of work? And this is, I think, the real future of where HR can go by being in a more agile way. What then connects very closely to that is a one size doesn't fit all. And we often thought we needed to do this because of equity reasons and also scalability reasons. But a lot of that can actually be achieved if we sort of think about the way that we go about it. So a really nice example, I think, of the one size doesn't fit all, but also able to scale it is Spotify recently looked at how could they give more choices in how people use their benefits, but also make choices in how they receive things like either shares or bonuses or pensions. And so what they did is they didn't go and just allow everyone to kind of tailor make their own, but they created 5 different options that fitted with 5 main persona types. So they had an option that was suited for someone that might be younger, that kind of didn't want to put everything into the pension just yet, and maybe wanted to have more cash available so they could use it more in day to day. And then they, of course, had other options for different types of people at different stages of their life. You know, you might have family now, or you might be near retirement. So and then they allowed you to choose to take up a different option, and then you were able to kind of review that every couple of years about how you wanted to take up your benefits and your kind of incentives. And it just gave a sense of choice and a sense of personalization, but it was still very scalable. So I think this is a nice example of how you can still achieve both. So do think about that with your solutions. And then also how you incrementally deliver that out. So if I think about that management development one, you know, how do you test the solution, very small scale to begin with, and then how could you start to roll that out across the business? So you're building on the solution over time, but you're delivering value slice by slice. So the idea is delivering value early and often in Agile. But that means you need to verify that it is valuable before you kind of roll it out. And then, of course, radical business collaboration. So we could do a whole meetup on this one. But this is breaking down the operating model of HR, working much more multi-skilled and in T-shaped ways. But it's also how do we work really closely with the business to build solutions. And this is things such as people kind of join our teams, maybe on a temporary basis. We maybe run short design sprints to test solutions and prototype. We just ask people in the business and the organization to be users to test solutions and give us feedback to then build on that. So much more, rather than kind of more the traditional ways of engagement surveys and others, much more user testing as we roll solutions out. Okay, so I'm going to skip this one because I'm conscious of time. And I'll go over to some questions. So the 9 kind of principles that we looked at today was know your customer. So who's your customer? And also, how would you even break some of those customer segments down? Because a lot of you said, oh, employees. Okay, so where would you start and why? Define the value. So what's the value you're delivering to the business, the end customer, and the employee? How would you measure it? Innovate within constraints. Think of that human-centric design. So think of the experience that people are having. How do you test the experience and how do you build on that? Definitely work more evidence-based and fight the process waste. One size doesn't fit all. And then that incremental development and, of course, that radical business collaboration. So I saw a couple of questions go in. I know that we're right near time. So if anyone has to drop off, that's fine. What I'll do is I'll say goodbye, just in case you have to go. If you can go to PXO and get 20% off the book. So I'd love you to do that. But you can also, that's the landing page where you can stay in touch with PXO and come to some of our events. And I will go back and answer some of the questions that have come in. So I'll stay online for a bit longer. But I'll let Malcolm and others say something before we finish up.
It was super, Natalie. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Yeah, fantastic presentation. Very, very interesting.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll open the room to questions. I'm sure people have a few questions.
Yes, so I saw a couple that in the chat. Should I go and seek those out?
Right.
So we had one from John, which is, how can you do Agile HR with finance buy-in?
Without finance buy-in,
without finance buy-in. Okay.
Yeah,
like I think it depends on the context. What I would say is that you so there's different ways you could go about it. So if it's about is it about budget, or is it about just that they're not participating in the kind of project itself?
Yeah, so it's kind of related to the total reward. So if you want to get an agile approach to total rewards, but finance are still working off an annual cadence, how do you kind of navigate that water, I guess?
Yeah. Well, you could do something. So something I'm doing right now is that we're actually creating examples of different ways of doing things like base salary and bonus. You know, how, you know, would you take it away? Would you not? How does that actually look? And we're actually, we've mocked up a few examples. We've tested that first with sort of a HR group that we're working with, got them to think, well, these are the 3 that we really feel can either, you know, deliver the values and behaviors we want to see in the organization. And then we're taking that to different parts. And of course, we're taking it to the executive to get them to think about the solutions, but we're doing it in a way where we're actually taking a persona through them and getting them to think about the experience of those different solutions, really on a basic level. And it's not a full user test, but it's kind of the best you can get at that stage. But it really gets them thinking about the experience of the solution and takes it away from just that kind of how would you pay for it, and then you start to have those discussions around it. So naturally you start to go, okay, well, if we're paying bonuses, you know, quarterly, what did that look like? How would we calculate it? Where, you know, what's the pot, all of that. But that naturally comes into when people are engaging with the solution itself. So I find that kind of thing can really help. And also I just wouldn't let that limit. So with, you know, in this example, finance still does the annual budgets, but we're looking at how could you do solutions and reward that, because you can even do things like you can bank payments throughout the year and then it's paid at the end of the year, you know, these kind of things. So you can, but it allows it at much more real-time conversations to happen that are then collected over the year to them. So there's always workarounds. This is the innovate within constraints. So I would go exploring the possible solutions and what you want to achieve with them, and then go back to your constraints around the finance and see what's possible.
Cool. Thank you.
We did have one. We had HR doesn't always give value to the end customer. It's difficult to define. Most HR customer is employee and management. Exactly. That's why I wanted you to think about it. Because sometimes HR solutions actually gets in the way of delivering value to the end customer. So everything we do, we should always be thinking about how does this help the business get the job done and actually deliver that end value. And so I think it's a really important question. It also means things like you might create a solution, but you might not release it straight away because it's not the right time in the business cycle to release that. And it's better to do it at another time where people have, you know, more focus on the people side of things, that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I just see there's one more question there, Natalie, just about where can you do Agile training? I'm sure you can probably help with that.
Yeah,
From
you can come,
anyway.
depending on what you want, you can come to PXO. Particularly, we do lots of under $300 if possible. Okay, well, we can, there's a couple of things. One, you could come to the £30 3-hour meetup that we're doing in July, which is we take you through an agile design sprint and we actually work on career development. And it's a real example from a real company. So that could be a nice fun way of doing it. So that could be a start.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I'd just like to thank Natalie again. I think we all found that very interesting, even those of us who aren't in HR. It's kind of opened our mind to the possibilities of how Agile can be applied to areas that wouldn't traditionally be Agile and how it can be extended throughout an organization. So once again, just thanks very much, Tal. That was a great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks for having
Natal.
me.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Natal.
Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Have fun in Galway.
Sun's just come out.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
But despite
Life is good. See you all later.